This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com with my weekly review of the points I find interesting in Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. Of course, the big news of the week is the unfortunate passing of Kevin Sullivan, which I just did an update on, remembering him and going over some of the tributes. I'm sure there'll be something on him in next week's Observer. The official cause of death has not been released yet. He had been in the hospital since May. It's still unknown publicly what the accident is that Sullivan had that led to this issue with his leg and all of the health issues, but the unfortunate thing is he's gone. Another one of the all-time legends in this business, gone too soon, and I'm glad I had the chance to work with him. Another all-time legend in this business who, despite being very open about all of the bad things that alcohol has done in his life, and actually said in a recent interview, because he recently got rebaptized, became a Christian again, that alcohol is the result of every bad thing that's happened to him in his life in one way or another. But now he has his own Real American beer, and I'm not saying anything other than I guess it's a way to make money. But I guess Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are going to be involved in a movie kind of about the killing of Gawker, the whole situation of how the Gawker media, TMZ type-ish genre of reporting got taken down. I think it was something similar to TMZ. The only thing I know it for is this whole thing of the Hulk Hogan sex tape. I don't remember hearing anything else about it before, although I'm sure they were in existence. But if you remember, Hogan was having sex with Bubba the Love Sponge's wife, with Bubba the Love Sponge in the house. I mean, we've all heard about the wife swapping rumors and stuff related to Hogan over the years, which we won't get into. But the only thing we can confirm, because it is on tape, is I saw it. I'm not going to deny that I didn't see it. I saw it. It starts off, Bubba is in the actual room. He's like, I'm going to leave you guys to it. I'll be in the office. He walks off. I guess there was a tape recording that I'm not going to pretend I know all the details, but I guess this would all come out in the movie. But basically, there was a videotape recording Hogan having sex with Bubba's then wife, which I think they've divorced now. By the way, there's a hilarious video of Hogan completely hammered at a basketball game with this woman and Bubba at one point, and he's dancing and bumping and grinding and having a great old time. It's worth looking up. It's quite hilarious. Anyways, in the course of the lovemaking, Hogan uses the N-word. And when that got out, it led to him being fired from WWE for a while. They took him out of the Hall of Fame. He got all this negative publicity. For the record, and the link is in the description, Brian Knobbs. Well, I don't. It depends what your definition of, like, the N-word is not a good word to use. You're not going to find any tapes of me using it. I can tell you that. Brian Knobbs definitely uses it as a derogatory term when describing New Jack, because he doesn't like New Jack. I don't know if he feels that way about all people that are African American. He uses it. You can click on the link in the description. Brian Knobbs is close friends with Hogan, so you could imagine how close they've been over the years. Probably when they're together, you could just imagine in your mind what kind of conversations they might have. But anyways, apparently, according to various reports, Hogan he's indifferent about the project now, but it would definitely bring up some, like Hulk Hogan's at a high right now. He just had a great speech at the Donald Trump, I believe it's Republican convention, where he basically did a wrestling promo and got a huge reaction, and everyone's loving him. And like to have a movie made about this whole weird situation of, I mean, I guess if you're famous, people want you to bang their wives. I guess that's one of the perks of being famous. I don't know. Like, I know Hogan and Bubba were good friends at one point. And by the way, on an unrelated note, apparently Bubba is quite a controversial person himself, and made some comments at one time where Awesome Kong actually punched him 2 times in the TNA dressing room. But Hogan, I guess, had got Bubba a TNA job at this point. But apparently he's quite outspoken himself on certain things. So there's a lot of controversial viewpoints of that whole gang that Hogan used to hang out with. But yeah, I can't see it's. I forget if it's Ben Affleck or Matt Damon playing Hogan. I think it's Affleck, which would be interesting. I would watch that movie. The last movie I watched was The Iron Claw, which I didn't like overall. Didn't like the casting. Didn't like that they left out Chris Von Erich, and there's certain elements of the story I didn't like. But I would watch this Hulk Hogan Gawker movie because it's just such a crazy story. So, with that said, let me know what you think about it in the description, and let's get in to the rest of the Wrestling Observer points that I found interesting. WWE announced SummerSlam had 57,719 fans at Cleveland Browns Stadium, which would have been the biggest number that they've announced since 1992 at Wembley Stadium, where they said it was 82,000. Wrestle Tickets said the number was 55,858. Pretty close, even if they are exaggerating a little bit. TKO announced their Q2 earnings, which was the most successful second quarter WWE has ever had. The whole quarter between WWE and UFC produced $851,161,000 in revenue, which is huge. Apparently, TKO is working hard to get cities to pay site fees to bring in WWE for SmackDown Friday, UFC on Saturday, and even potentially taping a Raw on a Sunday that would air on a Monday. But they want to have like weekend festivity type things. They want cities to pay for this type of things. They are going to appears make WWE event tickets higher overall, because apparently they haven't seen any pushback, and they want to be more dynamic with ticket pricing and more aggressive. In other words, that's a nice way of putting it, that we want to make more money, so we're going to put ticket prices up higher. So we're going to get dynamic. They also announced that NXT's first 2 shows on the CW will be on the road. WWE has announced this. They're going to be October 1st at the Allstate Arena in Chicago with CM Punk, which should draw pretty well. And then October 8th, they're going to be in St. Louis with Randy Orton. So they're going with the local superstars from the main roster as the draws for these NXT shows. So obviously, it looks like NXT is going to step it up a notch. That's a long way from, you know what? I was in a non-contract guy in WWE's development system in 2006 briefly. And back in those days, they were just on the local television show, and the tapings were at a mini mall with like 3 bleachers on one side. And they were lucky if they got 100 people to the tapings. And there was one bathroom I don't even know if there was a bathroom for the fans. There was one bathroom for the wrestlers. There was always a lineup for. So it's come along. The development system at NXT has come a long way. So good for WWE for becoming such a powerhouse. I should have just stuck it out there, but I got after that whole Zack Ryder naked stink face incident with Bill DeMott. I just left. But one of my regrets in life, I should have just stuck it out. But it's easy to look back and call yourself dumb. But I was a star in Puerto Rico at that time, and it's like, do I wrestle in Puerto Rico in front of big crowds where I'm on TV and pushed, or do I do jobber matches in Deep South wrestling and get treated like shit by the contract talent? Speaking of that time, though, I will say one thing. Undertaker said that in a recent one of his dead man talks, whatever you want to call it, that Vladimir Kozlov, who I actually knew from Deep South Wrestling, I was close to his size, so they always had us practice together. And by the way, those were we were both quite stiff in those matches. But I could tell back then they had big plans with him. But Undertaker said Vladimir Kozlov was the original guy that was supposed to end the streak. In the end, it's funny, they didn't do much with him. I think he had a SmackDown match with Triple H. He probably wrestled The Undertaker at some point, but for whatever reason, nothing much happened with his career. But he was a nice guy. And we both liked wrestling each other because we were both stiff, and we both didn't care if we were stiff with each other. But he was really nice. He didn't have an ego or anything. Maybe he wasn't a good enough politician. Maybe that was his problem. Apparently, LA Knight, guy I've interviewed, had his deal restructured for a lot more money and a lot more time. His original deal was from 2021 to 2025. He started off as Max Dupree with the Maximum Male Models and evolved into LA Knight. Apparently, Penta and Phoenix are not going to be re-signing in all likelihood with AEW. I never expected to go to WWE. They haven't really done much of note in AEW. So I could definitely see that happening. Apparently for July, according to Wrestle Tickets, AEW Dynamite's tapings average 4,200. That's pretty good for AEW. Collision only average 1,500. By the way, these include comps. SmackDown averaged 12,000. Excellent. Raw averaged 10,000. And the handful of WWE house shows averaged 5,700. So interesting that the WWE house shows outdrew the Dynamite tapings. Keep in mind, I believe their house shows were like overseas and in Mexico. I don't even know if they had any American house shows in July. So they were definitely going to places that would draw more. But one of the things I find weird about AEW is they don't travel more internationally where they could get bigger crowds. But maybe the cost of traveling just isn't worth it. Obviously, they're going to have a big crowd for Wembley Stadium. WWE for SmackDown in Cleveland last Friday did 9,500. I would have thought they would have had a bigger crowd than that. Collision in Arlington last Saturday did 811. Former Vice President of WWE Talent Relations, Christine Allman, who had been with WWE since 2008, was fired this week. This must be a typo. I'm going to assume this is a typo, but according to what was written in the Wrestling Observer, and I'm going to assume this is a typo, that the SmackDown in Berlin, August 30th, has 1,143 tickets pre-sold, and the pay-per-view has 11,873 the following night. I am going to guess there is missing a 1 on the SmackDown pre-sale because I can't see that they would only have 1,143 tickets sold. I guess we'll see next week whether that's corrected or not. Raw in Baltimore this week that did a good rating despite the Olympics, which, by the way, I was at the gym today and saw the Brazil against Canada doubles volleyball team. My gosh, those Brazilian women were beautiful. Raw in Baltimore, 11,171. Dynamite and Rampage in Winston-Salem, North Carolina this week, 2,738. You would think that, I know they only used Flair maybe 5 times in AEW, but they would have kept him under contract and used him in towns like Winston-Salem, the heart of Horseman country, and actually advertised him for those towns where he would actually draw. There's a lot more they could have done with Flair. I know when he appeared in Charlotte, they didn't even pre-advertise it. And it only had and it was like Sting's final time in Charlotte too, and they only had 3,000. Just seems like it seems like I don't get why they didn't put Flair with someone. And at one point they could have had a whole Horseman reuniting thing with Anderson and Flair under contract and Barry Windham and Tully Blanchard. I know Tully Blanchard has had a falling out with them, but I don't know. Even JJ they could have used for something. It just seems like, I know some people will say, well, they're all old, but I mean, you can use the old and mix with the young to make something more entertaining. I heard Conan say, actually, Conan, who I've interviewed, I like him, that the difference between WCW and AEW is in WCW, the mid-card guys weren't getting as much opportunity, and the main event guys were really taking over and protecting their spots at the top. But there was a lot of mid-card guys that were ready to explode that could have done more. In AEW, the mid-card guys are getting the opportunities, and there's a lot of main event guys that aren't used as much as they should be, but the mid-card guys aren't ready yet to be featured like that. I heard Conan say that, and I'd have to agree from what I've seen. Apparently, also from The Undertaker's one-man show, him and Kane talked about their match against DDP and Canyon, where they were told by Vince to, quote, kill them. We all know that. I know DDP. I talked to him about it, and a lot of people thought The Undertaker had heat with DDP. But basically, Undertaker seems to be passing the buck here to Vince and saying it was Vince that wanted them destroyed. I feel bad for DDP because he bought himself out of his contract, and he ended up doing that horrible angle with The Undertaker's ex-wife that is only remembered because it was so bad. And by the way, I like DDP and The Undertaker. It was just, for whatever reason, it wasn't booked well. And then, I guess DDP got hurt by Bob Holly, and that pretty much was the end of his wrestling career. So DDP's done well for himself, and he's making a fortune in DDP yoga, and is become famous to a whole bunch of different people through the yoga app. And it's a great app that I should be doing a lot more. I really should. I haven't done it for a few weeks, and I'm feeling the difference. But it's sad how they treated DDP, considering he paid to get out of his contract. Apparently, Slammiversary had 5,100 pay-per-view buys. So the NXT, that's good for TNA apparently. So the NXT crossover has helped them. The MJF versus Templario for the American title drew 14,000 fans to Arena Mexico for CMLL. So, I mean, why don't they try and make a taping at the CMLL arena where they're drawing those hot crowds, and if they're going to use the AEW guys, show that match. Compare that to New Japan recent G1 numbers. August 3rd in Osaka, they had 1,711. August 8th in Yokohama, 2,900. August 7th in Tokyo, 1,504. August 6th in Tokyo, 1,503. The N1 Pro Wrestling Noah tournament in Yokohama, August 4th, had 949 tickets sold, or tickets out. So obviously, Japanese wrestling's hotter in Mexico right now than Japan by far. And I've heard Dave Meltzer say recently that one of the reasons wrestling is so dead in Japan right now is AEW has a lot of wrestlers under contract that would have been with New Japan if AEW didn't exist. So although AEW is definitely working with it, New Japan, and helping New Japan in some ways, in other ways, it's definitely affected their business in a negative way. Also, I think they got to go back to less acrobatics and more of the Bruiser Brody, the Sheik Abdullah the Butcher types, the scary monster American heels, rather than the athletic acrobatic style of stuff that they do now. In MMA news, UFC 306 is going to be the most expensive UFC show the company has ever done. Dana White has already spent $17 million on the show. There's 12,728 tickets sold right now. Most of these tickets have cost over $3,000 US, can hold over 15,000. And the only reason it's not sold out is because tickets are so expensive. Hello, Gabe. And again, I'll remind people if they want to see my podcast, Remembering Kevin Sullivan, I posted it. Dusan likes my hymn. Sure, I was listening to him while I was training in the gym today, listening to the vampire music. For some reason, it cheers me up with the death of Kevin Sullivan. But Kevin, I was thinking about you while I was working out today. I'm gonna miss you. Wish you the best and wish your family the best.